It remains one of the most controversial and talked about endings in the history of television. Some people loved it, others despised it, but the debate still remains. What happened to Tony Soprano at the end of The Sopranos? Did he or didn't he die? In an episode directed by Sopranos creator himself, David Chase, Tony sits with his family at Holsten's ice cream parlour for some onion rings and listens to Journey's Don't Stop Believing. His daughter Meadow struggles to park her car outside to join her family, and a mysterious character in a members-only jacket passes Tony on his way to the bathroom. With each jingle of the restaurant door opening, Tony glances up to look at who's walked in. We can't quite work out why, but tension is building. Something is about to happen. And then the door opens, Tony looks up, and we cut to black, just as the words of the song reach "Don't Stop." It was a revolutionary ending, the kind not seen on the small screen. To such an extent, it actually had people checking their TVs to make sure nothing had gone wrong. So what happened? Did Tony simply see his daughter walk in and enjoy a family meal for the evening? Was he shot by the members-only guy with the sight of his daughter, the very last thing Tony sees before he dies? The question as to whether Tony died or not at the end has been hotly debated for over 10 years, and surely the definitive answer can only come from the creator of the show, David Chase. But by now, Sopranos fans will surely realize that in spite of being dogged on the ending numerous times, Chase is never going to give a straight answer. And regardless of whether Tony died or not, that isn't the point. He's finished either way. Maybe he was shot right there and then by the members-only guy, and as to who ordered the hit, it could have been anyone. Butchie, Paulie, Patsy, Tony had far too many enemies by the end of the series. Maybe Noah walked in the restaurant in the end and punched Tony's fucking lights out. Even if he wasn't immediately killed, it's feasible that Tony would be whacked later on, and if not, he'd like to go to prison anyway, as a result of Carlo testifying. And above and beyond any of this, Tony has fundamentally gone beyond a point of redemption. There is no happy arc at the end of the series. It has gone from bad to worse. And by the end, Tony has become soulless and completely sociopathic. Regardless of whether he died or not, Tony is finished in more ways than one. In order to possibly come to a conclusion, let's collate everything David Chase has said about the ending and see if some kind of resolution can be formed. Chase was interviewed the day after The Sopranos finale aired, and his answer as to what happened was blunt and direct. "I have no interest in explaining, defending, reinterpreting or adding to what is there," he said. "No one was trying to be audacious, honest to God. We did what we thought we had to do. No one was trying to blow people's minds or thinking, wow, this'll piss them off. People get the impression that you're trying to mess with them, and it's not true. You're trying to entertain them. Anybody who wants to watch it, it's all there." Just a few months later, The Sopranos, The Complete Book was published, and in it, Chase spoke again of the ending, and to be honest, he sounded quite bitter and irritated. "There was a war going on that week, and attempted terror attacks in London," he said, "but these people were talking about onion rings." And he rejected the notion that there are hidden clues in the final scene that reveal what happened, saying the last episode is no Da Vinci Code. When it comes to fans analysing every nook and cranny of the finale to find an answer, Chase said, "Most of them, most of us, should have done this kind of thing in high school English class and didn't." And he also reiterated that this wasn't some kind of prank or attempt to troll the audience, saying, "Why would we entertain people for 8 years only to give them the finger?" 5 years later, and it seemed Chase had mellowed in his fury and lightened up when it came to The Sopranos ending, when he jokingly compared it with the controversial ending of Senfield, saying, "Senfield, they ended it with all of them going to jail. Now that's the ending we should have had, and they should have had ours, where it blacked out in a diner." Chase opened up a lot more on the ending of The Sopranos months later when he was asked about it whilst promoting his new film, Not Fade Away. He said, "People still ask me what happened. They don't ask me if Tony is alive or dead, but I know that's where it's going. My answer is, if I was going to tell you that, I would have told you. If he didn't die that night, he's going to die very soon. And the problem is the same. There are the number of minutes in life, and they go like this," he added, making a ticking sound. They're gone, and you don't know when it's coming. That's all I wanted to say. He elaborated in a further interview. Tony was dealing in morality every day. He was dishing out life and death, and he was not happy. He was getting everything he wanted, that guy, but he wasn't happy. All I wanted to do was present the idea of how short life is, and how precious it is. The only way I felt I could do that was to rip it away. Chase's words here are quite suggestive, and strengthen the theory that Tony died, and he goes on further. Am I supposed to do a scene and ending where it shows that crime doesn't pay? Well, we saw that crime pays. We've been seeing that for how many years? Now, in another sense, we saw that crime didn't pay because it wasn't making him happy. He was an extremely isolated, unhappy man. And then finally, once in a while, he would make a connection with his family and be happy there. But in this case, whatever happened, we never got to see the result of that. It was torn away from him and from us. That sounds pretty conclusive, but Chase would go on to throw a spanner in the mix a couple of years later. According to Vox writer Martha P. Nochimson, she asked him whether Tony was dead in the finale, and he shook his head and simply said, "No, he isn't." So it looks like the previous interviews weren't conclusive, and it turns out Tony isn't dead after all. But wait, there's more, because shortly after that, Entertainment Weekly published a statement from Chase via his representative saying, "A journalist for Fox misconstrued what David Chase said in their interview. To simply quote David as saying, 'Tony Soprano is not dead,' is inaccurate. There is a much larger context for that statement, and as such, it is not true. As David Chase has said numerous times on the record, whether Tony Soprano is alive or dead is not the point. To continue to search for this answer is fruitless. The final scene of The Sopranos raises a spiritual question that has no right or wrong answer." And just days after the apparent conversation with Nochimson, Chase said, "I don't recall that conversation. I'm sure it happened, but I don't recall it. And if I did say that, I believe I was probably thinking about something else." Perhaps the most interesting thing Chase has ever said about The Sopranos ending, one that is more revealing than any other statement, is the most recent one, made when speaking with Sopranos Sessions co-creator Matt Zoller Seitz. Chase was talking about the ending, and he said, "I think I had that death scene around 2 years before the end. Tony was going to get called to a meeting with Johnny Sack in Manhattan, and he was going to go back through the Lincoln Tunnel for this meeting, and it was going to go black there, and you never saw him again as he was heading back, the theory being that something bad happens to him at the meeting, but we didn't do that." Seitz then said to Chase, "You realize of course that you just referred to that as a death scene." And after a pause, Chase replied, "Fuck you guys," with a laugh, and then he added, "I changed my mind over time. I didn't want to do a straight death scene. I didn't want you to feel like, oh, he's meeting with Johnny Sack and he's going to get killed. That's the truth of it." So it looks like the ending of The Sopranos is cleared up then, with Chase accidentally letting slip that Tony dies at the end. But hold your horses, because Seitz revealed that he asked Chase to clarify his comments, and Chase said that the death scene he was referring to was not the diner scene at the end, but an earlier idea that he had abandoned. And he added, "I seriously doubt that's going to dissuade anybody from believing whatever it is they already believe. If the last 12 years have taught us anything, it's that to misquote a famous Simon and Garfunkel song, a Sopranos fan will hear what he wants to hear and disregard the rest." There's also one more interview where DGA Quarterly sat down with Chase and he went through the ending scene. He said, "When it's over, I think you're probably always blindsided by it, that's all I can say. The last shot of Tony ends on 'Don't Stop'. It's mid-song. I'm not going to go into if that's Tony's point of view. I just thought the possibility would go through a lot of people's minds, or maybe everybody's mind, that he was killed. He might have gotten shot 3 years ago in that situation, but he didn't. Whether this is the end here or not, it's going to come at some point for the rest of us. I thought the ending would be somewhat jarring, sure, but not to the extent it was, and not a subject of such discussion. I really had no idea about that. I never considered the black a shot. I just thought what we see is black. The ceiling I was going for at that point, the biggest feeling I was going for, honestly, was 'Don't Stop Believing.' It was very simple and much more on the nose than people think. That's what I wanted people to believe, that life ends and death comes, but don't stop believing. Life is short. Either it ends here for Tony or some other time, but in spite of that, it's really worth it, so don't stop believing. So when you listen to Chase talk about the ending of The Sopranos, when you put it all together, all the separate interviews he's done, he does seem to tend to lean on the idea that Tony dies at the end. But saying that, he often reiterates that whether Tony dies or not is not the point. Whether he died that night or on some other night, either way, it's over for him, and it happens to all of us at some point. David Chase is also spearheading a new movie set in the Sopranos universe, a prequel to the show, which will feature a young Tony Soprano alongside many returning characters from the show. Maybe there will be some clues as to how Tony ended up in the movie, but it's unlikely. So what did you think? Are you in the camp of people who feel he died, or do you think Tony went on to live as the boss of New Jersey? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.